Today we're going to be tying a white wing blue charm. This is kind of the standard blue charm you're going to see in Newfoundland and Labrador, or standard white wing blue charm, I should say. I'll quickly just say, as I'm going through, what the alternative is for like two of the parts to basically tie the dark wing version of this. Without further ado, let's go ahead and tie in our size 8 black thread, which is the thread that's used throughout this whole fly. So I usually start the thread roughly in the middle of the body. I'll usually tie up to just where the hook, the sharp part starts. I will say I'm not a professional tyer by any degree whatsoever. This is purely just a hobby that I usually do. You know, basically whenever I'm not fishing or whenever a couple of friends of mine maybe want a couple of flies. But figured, you know, maybe people are getting into tying, maybe want some sort of tutorial slash just interested. So this is the tag that I'm tying right now. So this is small oval silver tinsel. And I've just wrapped it around as the tag 3 or 4 times. Maybe a bigger fly you do 5, a smaller fly you do 3. This is a size 8, so it's kind of right in the middle between, like, you know, size 2s and size 12. So I usually just do around 4 total. So next step, if I rotate it, you might be able to see it. I don't fully hide this, you know, the tinsel quite yet, because we still have the kind of the head to tie in, or the butt, sorry, I should say. And for the white wing blue charm, you can use yellow. Some people use a green. I kind of go right in the middle and use a chartreuse. It's kind of this like lime, greeny, really bright yellow kind of color, almost like a neon-y yellow green. And we'll go ahead and string that up. So you'll notice I have a ton more towards this side of the hook and a lot less on that side. And I'll quickly show you why here in a second. But we'll go ahead and get this tied in. So I'll tie it right up to the tag, kind of skipping. I won't be doing like touching thread wraps or anything like that. And then tie it all the way back. Roughly double the length of the tag is what I usually do. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. It's nothing super scientific about the method to my madness or anything like that. But we'll get all the way up to the tag and then go back on itself. Basically like overlapping thread wraps here. I usually just do 2 or 3 to kind of hold that part in place. And then what we'll do is we'll actually fold this back over the top and tie it in. And the reason being is just because in some of the tutorial videos I started watching when I first started fly tying, apparently it's way more durable and you'll get way less fraying, or like the teeth of a fish get on it or whatever it might be. It'll ultimately just fray less. So apparently it's more durable. Like I said, I've only ever tied it this way, so I wouldn't really be able to speak to tying it any other way and what that's like. So that part is done, and the next step is we will tie in some golden pheasant crest. So that's kind of what it looks like originally. I'm kind of looking for just a decent piece. There's a bunch of long ones that are kind of hidden in these, you know, crests. Just trying to pluck one reasonably length piece out, because I'm not looking to use up a ton or anything like that. So all I got is something about that big. So I will place it down, and you want to kind of stick up like that. And sometimes when you pull them out, they get a little twist to them. So ultimately I do a loose wrap first, and then kind of when I get it in a position that I'm happy with, I will tighten it up. So I'm pretty happy with that. Some pieces obviously started to come out. Like I said, I'm sure if this was my full-time job, I'd probably restart this, but I'm just gonna cut them out. Keep it simple. Doesn't need to be perfect. As the saying goes, nice flies catch fishermen, not necessarily fish. So now that's tied in, I'll usually do a couple wraps behind it. That way it's actually pinching, and then one over it. And that way it's actually pinching directly on the thread, which I find gives it a bit of a better bite. And then we'll just snip off the excess. Okay, next step is basically preparing to tie in the rib. So I'll cut some more silver tinsel. Again, I use the same size throughout, so it was small for the tag, and I'm gonna use size small for the rib as well. If you get up into like this, I find the small stuff is basically pretty good for flies as big as size 6. If you're getting down into maybe the 4s or the 2s, maybe I'd go to like a size medium instead, but size small does 90% of things. So once that is tied in up there, we can go ahead and work our way down. You'll notice here that I've actually left some of that overhanging silver tinsel, and the reason being is, see if I can get a view of it, is this part of where it bends here. I'm basically just going to use this to fill in some of the weight there, because when you start to wrap your body, maybe it's just nice to have a little bit of material laid down as the base that makes this part a little less pronounced when you're first doing it. And to do that, I just start it pretty loose, because if you do it too tight, it wants to spin around to the top of the hook. So try and keep it pretty loose right until the end, where you got it in a position that you're happy with. Then I don't go too close to the eye of the hook. Ultimately, just like to have a lot of it left so that I can tie in a Newfoundland hitch, or half hitch it, or whatever it might be, and ultimately just give myself some more options to present it to fish a little bit differently. So this specifically calls for black wool. The body does, I should say. I've seen floss, I've seen stretch used. Ultimately, I got both options here in my little cabinet thing next to me. But for whatever reason, more so honestly just in the mood to use wool today. I find it hides a lot of imperfections, and maybe it'll look a little bit better on camera. One thing I do as well is this piece that we tied in here, I'll actually fold it up and wrap over it. No idea if that's good to do, bad to do, but I find it just adds a little bit of security, and I get a lot less fraying of one of the sides after a long period of time when I do that. In that case, it was pretty short, but if it's a bit too long, I'll just trim it when I fold it over. But we'll go right up to where we tied in the tail, and we'll come all the way back. And then with our rib, I don't have a rotary vise, because like I said, I'm not necessarily doing this super often or for a ton of flies over and over again. So I actually just manually wrap the tinsel around the fly. You'll notice here I'm only doing 4 or 5 turns, especially for salmon flies, at least here in Newfoundland and Labrador. You really never do more than 4 or 5 kind of goes of the rib. Honestly, I wouldn't be able to tell you the reason. It's kind of just everything I've heard, and almost every single fly I've seen never really exceeds that many turns. So that's all tied in. And now we will switch to doing the throat hackle. I'm getting pretty low on my decent throat hackle, so I kind of got to make do with some of the crappy stuff that I got kicking around. It's not as nice looking, but when it gets wet, can't really tell the difference. You know, I'm really the only one that can kind of tell the difference as I'm actually actively tying it. But I need a bit more. All right. So I'm pretty happy with that. We'll go ahead and tie this in. So like with most things, I do kind of that one wrap, and then ultimately I'm just kind of flattening it down as we go here. I'll usually brush it out just a little bit after to kind of help it sit a bit nicer, but I'm not too worried about the initial placement. After I have a few wraps done, I'll actually just fold this back and I'll put the thread on this side of it. And I'm not sure if you kind of see how that sits now, but it sits kind of away from the eye look a lot better. And the reason being, at least that I do that, is that it becomes a lot easier, A, to know where to cut, and also get a really close, clean cut. So that's a lot easier to kind of hide a lot of that away. But at this point I'll stop, and I'm not gonna hide the blue yet, because we have to tie in our wing, and if we spent a bunch of time hiding away the blue, our head kind of just gets unnecessary, or the blue hackle, our head just gets unnecessarily bigger as it goes. So I actually paused there. I'll do maybe a bit of tidying, but that one was actually pretty good that I'm kind of able to save a lot of those steps. So, get my hair stacker, pull out. It's good to pull out, especially with calf tail, usually just some like fuzzies where you cut it. So get all those pulled out so they're not impacting the hair stacker too much. And then we'll go ahead and get all those lined up. Once again, I'll usually just double check that all the fluffies are out or any loose kind of ones have come free. And one thing I like to do before as well, especially with calf tail, is I'll actually pre-glue where I'm planning to kind of tie these in. I find sometimes it just helps it seat a little bit better, covers more of the strands. Nothing worse than getting a new fly on the river and you're kind of pulling on it as you tie it in, and just, you know, whatever the wing you had was just starts flying out. It's really no fun for anybody. So I usually do 4 or 5 wraps, kind of secure that down to where that glue I placed was. I'm gonna put my lid back on my glue, otherwise it's gonna be glued over by the time I need to use it again. And then I'll fold the back of those up, and once again, wrap underneath them, because it starts to make them stick up a little bit. And then individually grab, if I can get this on camera, some kind of individual sections here, and I'll slowly wrap individual sections so that the thread is kind of focusing on a less amount of the wing, and it's able to kind of grab more pieces of the individual wing itself, ultimately just to, you know, help these stick down and all that good stuff. And now that that's all done, we will attempt to trim it as close as we can. I find doing it in sections versus one big cut, I've learned, allows you to get a lot closer to the thread as well, so there's less to clean up at the end. Still a couple pieces misbehaving here. You might have to go over some areas a couple times, really just trying to get as much cut off as you can. A couple of scragglers made their way to the bottom. Okay, so that's not horrible. I find calf tail is just a lot more difficult. With the dark wing blue charms, you would do a red bud instead of the fluorescent green or yellow, and you'd actually do moose body. And moose body is way easier to tie in, at least in my own kind of experience. So specifically with calf tail, I'll usually try just to get a single drop of glue, kind of on all those fuzzy ends. Really just, again, trying to get a bit of a better grip from the thread to the calf tail. I just find calf tail is a little bit tedious trying to get a really nice tidy head put on it, so, and hold all the wings simultaneously. Well, that is not as perfect. Oh, a couple pieces we missed down on bottom here. That's much better there now. So most of that's hidden. Bit of a bigger head than I usually like to do. But like I said, I find calf tail really, really tough to get a really nice clean head and tiny head on. So then we'll simply just whip finish, I think 5 times around. I think that was 5, it might have been 6. As long as you don't do too many where the thread has too much friction to pull through, but you also do enough to hold it. So that right there is a white wing blue charm.